I was asleep in the back seat of my dented Ford Escape in a Walmart parking lot in Mesa, Arizona at 1:47 a.m. when a knock on my window jolted me awake. The security guard had already told me earlier that night, "You cannot keep sleeping here, ma'am. People complain." I was still pulling my jacket tighter around my chest when the officer leaned in, ran my license, and said quietly, "Homeland Security wants your location." My hands started shaking. A flag from 1998 had just appeared on my file. My name is Dana. I am 39 years old. I am a former Army communications and cyber support specialist who now works in compliance and risk when anyone will still hire me. The officer standing by my door was Officer Hale, a local cop who looked just as confused as I felt as his tone shifted from routine to protocol. "My family lives 15 minutes from here. My mother Marlene is the kind of military mom who loves the image more than the people. My brother Kyle never served but tells everyone he almost did. His wife Brooke posts support our troops memes and blocks me in real life." And the voice that came through Officer Hale's radio belonged to Ms. Rivas, an analyst from Homeland Security, who sounded tired, precise, and very real. My mother's voice was still in my head from earlier that day. "You always make things worse, Dana." I did not know it then. But that night when I was treated like trash in a Walmart lot would be the night I got my name back, exposed a paper war meant to erase me, and forced the people who laughed at my downfall to pay for it in the most legal way possible. For a second, I honestly thought DHS just needed Wi-Fi or had the wrong Dana. Officer Hale did not smile. Step 1, he knocked. Step 2, he ran my license. Step 3, his posture changed and he took a half step back. Step 4, dispatch confirmed DHS wanted my location. Step 5, he said the words "flag from 1998. Step 6, he told me not to move because this was now protocol. I did not ask what protocol meant because I already knew it meant my night was no longer mine. If your own government asked for your location, would you sit still and trust the system, or would you run? The number 1998 echoed in my head like a loose screw. I had been 12 years old in 1998. Whatever that flag was, it had been buried deeper than my credit score. Officer Hale kept his voice calm, but his eyes kept flicking to his dashboard like he was waiting for something else to light up. Ms. Rivas came on the line and asked one question. "Where are you physically right now?" I said, "In a Walmart parking lot." "If you are judging me, please take a number." She did not laugh. She said this flag was created in 1998 by someone with access. You do not see any more. Stay where you are. We need your location. My throat went dry. I did not tell her my mother lived 15 minutes away, or that my brother had been acting strangely calm about audits he said would never touch us. I did not tell her that earlier that week I had seen a box in my mother's garage labeled 1998 tax, and thought nothing of it. I just sat there and watched the blue-red reflection ripple across my cracked windshield, and felt the past crawl back into the present. I thought about all the times I had done everything right, and still ended up here sleeping in my car, brushing my teeth in a gym bathroom, asking strangers for mailing addresses, pretending my life was temporary. I thought about my brother telling people, "Real soldiers do not end up like this." I thought about my mother saying at Sunday dinner, "You can organize a battalion, but you cannot organize your own life." And now a federal agency wanted my location because of something buried in 1998. I wrapped my arms around myself and waited for whatever was coming next. Before this story continues, please allow me to clarify something important. The story you are about to hear is a work of fiction created for entertainment and educational purposes, centered on toxic family conflict and its emotional impact within the context of military life and military families in the United States. All characters' ranks units, events, and circumstances are entirely fictional and do not represent or refer to any real individuals, military units, or organizations of the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, or Coast Guard. Content may be assisted by AI tools during the creative and production process. This story is not intended to depict real events, disclose military information, or promote violence, hatred, or harm in any form. The message is told with respect for the core values of the United States military, such as honor, discipline, responsibility, and human dignity. All content is built to be advertiser-friendly, compliant with YouTube community guidelines, and not intended to misrepresent or distort the image of the United States military or its service members. If you are a woman who has stood behind a military family, stayed quiet, endured more than anyone saw, please stay until the end. And if this story touches you, share your feelings in the comments, or follow the channel to continue with stories for strong hearts that rarely get heard. 6 months earlier, I still had an address. It was not glamorous. A one-bedroom rental near Dobson Road, the kind of place with thin walls, and a neighbor who vacuumed at odd hours, but it was mine. I had a key, I had a desk, I had a routine. I woke up early, checked compliance tickets, answered emails from project managers who like to sound urgent, and did the work nobody claps for until something goes wrong. That was my lane. In the Army, I learned communications and cyber support, the unsexy kind of competence that keeps a unit moving and keeps mistakes from turning into disasters. After I got out, I moved into contractor compliance and risk because it made sense. It was still checklists, still accountability, still living inside rules people pretend they read. I was not a special agent. I was not anyone important on a poster. I was a veteran who knew how to keep systems clean and how to spot where they break. And that is exactly why what happened to me felt like being strangled with paper. The first hit came on an ordinary Tuesday when my card got declined at a grocery store. Not a dramatic decline either. Just that polite beep that makes you feel like everyone can hear your life falling apart. I checked my banking app in the parking lot and saw a credit freeze I did not request. No warning. No email, just a lock on my name. I called the bureau, did the automated maze, finally reached a human who sounded bored, and she told me there was a fraud marker. Fraud marker. Those words have weight. They do not just sit on your file, they seep into every decision other people make about you. I tried to fix it the way I fix everything. Calm, notes, timestamps. If this were a military network issue, I would isolate the source document, the chain, and restore function. But civilian life does not come with a help desk that cares. Every call ended with someone telling me to fax something, upload something, wait 10 business days, and meanwhile I could not access what I had earned. Then came the background check failure. I was up for a renewal on a contract, nothing classified, just a standard review. The recruiter who used to write smiley faces in her emails suddenly stopped using my name. Her tone turned sterile. She said there was a trust risk, and the client could not proceed. Trust risk. That was it. No argument. No appeal. A week later, my contract was canceled. My income vanished in one polite paragraph. I had savings, not a fortune, but enough to breathe for a while. Except breathing is expensive when your identity is being treated like a questionable rumor. My landlord wanted the next month's rent plus a new deposit because the lease was ending and he wanted security. I could not even blame him. He did not know me. He knew the report. The deposit number sat on the screen like a joke. I did not have it. Not anymore. When I packed my things into the back of the Escape, I told myself it was temporary. 2 weeks. A reset. In the Army, you learn to endure discomfort without turning it into a personality. I tried to do the same. The first night in the car, I slept with my shoes on, and my keys in my hand like that would make me less homeless. The second week, I figured out the small survival math. I bought a gym day pass for showers because walking into a bathroom with a towel and acting normal is easier than people think. You just have to look like you belong. I kept a toothbrush and deodorant in a zip bag. I learned which gas stations had cleaner sinks and which ones had a clerk who watched you like you were about to steal the air. I got a P.O. box because every form demands an address, even when life has decided you do not deserve one. The woman behind the counter looked at my paperwork and said, "Are you stable?" She meant it like a policy question. It still landed like an insult. Unstable. Because a file is dirty. Because a system says fraud marker. I started hearing that word in the tone people used when they spoke slower, like I might fall apart if they used normal speed. It was paperwork warfare. Nobody had to hit me. They just had to poison the record and let the world do the rest. The cruelest part was how ordinary it looked from the outside. Nobody sees the stack of letters. Nobody sees the hold times. They just see a woman in a car and decide she must have made bad choices. Even my family saw it that way. My mother Marlene loves to say she supports the troops. She has a faded bumper sticker and a flag on the porch, and stories about me that she tells like she is the one who served. When she found out I was living in my vehicle, she did not ask how. She asked what I did. At Sunday dinner, she looked at me the way she looks at clutter and said, "You can organize a battalion, but you cannot organize your own life." The room went quiet in that familiar way, the way it does when everyone knows she went too far, but nobody wants to challenge the woman holding the family image together with control. Kyle leaned back like he was judging a documentary. He never served, but he loves to talk about it like it is a personality trait he almost earned. He said real soldiers do not end up like this. He said it with that patriotic certainty people use when they want to feel superior without learning anything. Brooke nodded, because Brooke always nods at whatever makes her look morally aligned. She posted later that night on Facebook, praying for family during hard times, grateful for the sacrifices of our service members. Then she blocked me. In real life, she did not want my name attached to hers. Online, she wanted the glow. I did not argue with any of them. I am not proud of that, but it is true. I have always been better at swallowing pain than wasting it on people who enjoy watching you choke. I watched, I listened. I stored details like evidence because that is what my brain does when it feels cornered. I kept thinking, this is temporary, this is fixable. I said it the way you say just one more mile when your legs are burning and quitting feels like dying. And I tried to keep a sense of humor because if you cannot laugh, you start breaking. The Army taught me to sleep anywhere. I did not realize it meant Walmart. I told myself that while I pulled a blanket over my shoulders and listened to carts rattle in the distance like the world had somewhere to go. One afternoon in a public library, I logged into my email to track yet another dispute form, and I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. A mailing address had been added to an account under my name, a forwarding address I did not recognize at first. Then I saw the zip code, and my mind snapped into focus. It was the same neighborhood Kyle lived in, not a similar area, the same cluster of streets I had driven through 100 times for barbecues and birthdays. My hands went cold on the keyboard. I did not accuse him. Not yet. I did not even tell myself I was sure. I just stared at the screen and felt the air change like a room after someone says a name they should not have said. That night, when I drove past my mother's house to pick up a box of old documents I had left in her garage, I saw a cardboard box near the water heater with black marker across the top. 1998 tax. I paused with my hand on it like it might bite. I was 12 in 1998. My mother does not keep anything unless it serves her story. I did not open the box. I told myself it was none of my business. I told myself not to spiral. But the number sat in my head on the drive back to the Walmart lot, heavy and persistent. So here is what I want to ask you, and I want you to answer it honestly, not politely. Do you believe family gets unlimited chances, or do you think respect has an expiration date? Sunday evenings at my mother's house in Glendale were supposed to be safe. Roast chicken, boxed wine, the same polite conversations about weather and work and church. That night felt different the moment I stepped through the door. The living room was fuller than usual. 2 neighbors from across the street, an aunt I barely spoke to anymore, a couple from her church who liked to ask personal questions and then pray about the answers. Kyle was already there, sitting at the head of the table like he owned the place. Brooke hovered near him, phone in hand, smiling at everyone except me. My mother moved fast between the kitchen and the table like she was hosting a fundraiser instead of a family dinner. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "Try to be normal tonight, Dana. People are here." That was my warning. The humiliation started gently, the way it always does. My mother raised her glass and said, "Kyle has been working so hard. He is the reliable one. He is the one who shows up." Everyone smiled at him. Kyle did that modest shrug he practices in the mirror. Then he launched into a story about how he almost joined the military after high school. He talked about the recruiter who supposedly begged him to sign up, about how he would have gone airborne, about how he understood discipline, because he had watched a documentary once. People nodded like he had earned something. My aunt touched his arm and said, "We need more men like you." I watched him lie and collect respect like tips. Nobody looked at me. Then a woman from church turned to me with a soft smile that felt sharp underneath and said, "So Dana, you still doing that little computer thing, the little computer thing. Years of training, years of service, years of compliance work that kept companies from getting fined into oblivion, reduced to a hobby you pick up after dinner." I did not correct her. I did not explain. I just nodded and took a sip of water because if I spoke, I might say something that would make my mother hiss my name later. Brooke laughed quietly and said, "She is between opportunities right now." She said it the way people say, between moods. My mother leaned in and added, "We all go through phases. Some of us just take longer to grow out of them." Everyone chuckled. I stared at the tablecloth and counted breaths. When you are raised in a house like that, you learn to survive by shrinking. The conversation shifted to Luke Air Force Base. One of the neighbors mentioned a new contract coming through. Kyle puffed up again and said he knew a guy who was already in talks. I listened. I had been following that contract for months. It was public enough to be rumored, but not public enough for details. I said almost to myself, that contract got paused last week. The table went quiet. Kyle laughed like I had told a joke. My mother frowned at me and said, "Dana, do not start making things up. You do not even have a job right now." The neighbor raised an eyebrow at me like I had just tried to join a conversation I was not qualified for. I did not explain how I knew. I did not mention the compliance bulletin. I did not mention the internal memo. I just nodded and went back to my plate. It was easier to be wrong than to be resented. After dinner, my mother insisted everyone move to the living room for coffee. One of the church couples mentioned the VFW Hall fundraiser coming up. Kyle said he might volunteer because he supports veterans. He looked at me when he said it. The husband from church asked me if I went to the VFW. I said sometimes. He said it must be hard watching people like Kyle who almost served. I smiled and said, everyone has their own path. Inside my chest, something folded in on itself. My mother told a story about how Kyle helped her fix the garage door and how I had forgotten to call her back once. She framed it like a joke. The room laughed. Kyle leaned back and said, "You know, real soldiers do not end up like this." He gestured vaguely in my direction. Nobody challenged him. Brooke typed something into her phone and smirked. I felt every eye on me measuring my failure like it was a group project. I did not cry. I did not storm out. I just sat there and let them have their story. Later, when people were putting on jackets and my mother was handing out leftovers, I heard Kyle in the kitchen talking to one of the neighbors. He said, "My guy said the audit will not touch us." I froze in the hallway. Audit. That word does not come up in casual conversation unless you are already thinking about it. He lowered his voice and laughed like it was an inside joke. I walked back into the living room and thanked my mother for dinner like nothing had happened. She hugged me stiffly and whispered, "Try harder, Dana. You embarrass me when you act like this." I drove back to the Walmart lot with the taste of coffee and shame in my mouth. I replayed the night in my head. The lies, the jokes, the way nobody defended me, the way Kyle said audit like he was daring the universe to notice him. I did not confront him. Not yet. I had learned the hard way that when people think they have won, they get sloppy. And I had learned something else, too. The table had smiled at me and still wanted me gone. Have you ever sat at a table where everyone smiled and still wanted you gone? The week after that dinner, everything that had been wrong quietly became dangerous. It started with a letter from the IRS that said there was a mismatch in my reported income. Not an accusation, not an audit. Just a polite notice that something did not align and needed clarification. I laughed when I read it because my income had been painfully simple for months. One canceled contract, a few small freelance invoices, nothing creative, nothing hidden. I logged into my account to check and found a new profile activity I did not recognize. A phone number that was not mine, a mailing address that was not mine. It was the same Glendale zip code again. 2 days later, I got an email from a credit card company thanking me for opening a new account. I did not open a new account. I called them. They said the application had my social security number and a signature that matched my name. I told them it was fraud. They told me they would investigate and froze the account. Then my bank app showed a pending charge from a moving company in Phoenix. I canceled my debit card and sat in the front seat of my Escape, gripping the steering wheel like I was about to drive into a wall. This was not random anymore. Then my landlord called. The same man who had been calm about my move-out date sounded stiff. He said he had received a notice that I had abandoned the property and was being investigated for illegal subletting. I told him I had been sleeping in my car. He said the notice looked official and he had forwarded it to his attorney. I told him it was false. He said he needed distance until it was resolved. I hung up and stared at my notebook. In the Army, when something goes wrong, you do not panic. You inventory. You make a list. You draw a line. I bought a spiral notebook from Walmart and started a timeline. Date, event, source, consequence. I wrote down the credit freeze, the background check failure, the contract cancellation, the IRS mismatch, the new credit cards, the landlord notice. Each one by itself could be a glitch. Together they were a pattern. This was not chaos. This was choreography. I started thinking the way I used to think when I had a common access card clipped to my uniform. In that world, nothing happens unless someone with authorization allows it. Doors open because a system says yes. Files change because a system says yes. Accounts get flagged because a system says yes. This was not brute force. This was authority by paper. Someone was killing me administratively without touching me. It was administrative violence. They did not need a weapon. They just needed forms and access and patience. I started tracing the access points. Who could add a mailing address? Who could request a credit freeze? Who could file a notice to a landlord? Who could create a fraud marker? Each step required a different door, but every door had one thing in common. They trusted the paperwork more than the person standing in front of them. I called the credit bureau again and asked for the source of the fraud marker. They told me it was tied to a notarized document submitted months earlier. I asked for a copy. They said I needed a subpoena or the original submitter's authorization. That word again, authorization. I drove to my mother's house and went through the boxes in her garage while she was at church. I did not take anything. I just photographed labels and dates. I found the 1998 tax box again, and a folder of old power of attorney forms that were never mine. I did not accuse her, not yet. I needed proof. Back in my car, I opened my email and searched my mother's name. I found an old forwarded message from years ago when she had sent me a scanned document to ask what it meant. It was a blurry photo of a notary stamp. I had answered her question and forgotten about it. I zoomed in now and my stomach dropped. The year on the stamp was 1998. I stared at it until my eyes hurt. That stamp meant someone had formalized something under my name. Someone with access. Someone with motive. I wrote it down in the notebook and circled the date. 1998. The same year as the box. The same year as the flag officer Hale mentioned. My phone buzzed with another alert. Another background check failed. Another trust risk. I laughed out loud in my car because at some point you either laugh or you break. I flipped the notebook to a clean page and wrote one sentence. Who benefits from my collapse? The answer was not abstract. It had a name. I did not call Kyle. I did not call my mother. I called an old sergeant I had served under years ago. I had not spoken to him in a long time. He answered on the second ring and said my name like he was glad to hear it. I told him I was dealing with a paperwork mess and asked a few careful questions. His tone shifted. He asked who else knew. I said nobody yet. He said he could make a call. I said not yet. There was a pause. Then he said, "You sound like you are building a case." I said, "I am." He said, "Keep notes and do not confront anyone." I thanked him and hung up. That was my next sign. The way he answered. The way he listened. The way he did not laugh when I said paperwork warfare. I was not imagining this. The violence was real, even if the bruises were invisible. That night in the Walmart lot, I laid the notebook on my lap and read my own timeline. Each entry was a small cut. Together they were an attempt to erase me. I looked at the notary stamp photo again. 1998. That year would not leave me alone. Someone had planted a seed back then and waited decades to use it. And now it was sprouting in my credit score and my landlord's inbox and my IRS account. I closed the notebook and whispered to myself, not yet. Whoever was doing this thought they were invisible. They thought paper would protect them. They forgot one thing. I had built my life around reading systems and finding where they lie. The blue and red lights washed over my windshield again like the world was breathing in and out around me. Officer Hale stood a few steps back from my door now, not aggressive, not friendly, just careful in a way that felt heavier than handcuffs. His radio crackled, and he listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening just enough for me to notice. When he looked back at me, his voice was still calm, but it had shifted into something procedural, the tone people use when the rules have taken over. "Dispatch just confirmed the flag, ma'am. I need you to stay in the vehicle for now." He did not reach for his gun. He did not put a hand on my door. He simply took another half step back like I had become a variable he was not trained to improvise around. I tried to keep my breathing slow. In the Army, you learn that panic wastes oxygen. I forced a small smile and said, "Am I getting arrested for being poor?" He almost smiled back. "Almost. Not exactly, ma'am. This is just protocol." That word again. Protocol. The invisible fence that decides how people are allowed to treat you. I nodded like I understood, even though my stomach felt like it had dropped into my shoes. His radio crackled again, and this time he answered it immediately. "Yes, yes, she is here. Yes, in Mesa." His eyes flicked to me, then away. He turned the volume down, but not enough. I heard a woman's voice, flat and precise, not angry, not dramatic. Officer Hale held the radio out toward me. "Ms. Rivas from Homeland Security wants to speak with you." I took the radio like it was something fragile. "This is Donna." "Where are you physically right now?" The question was simple, but the way she asked it made it sound like geography mattered more than feelings. "In a Walmart parking lot. If you are judging me, please take a number." There was a pause, then a quiet exhale. "I am not judging you. I am logging you. Stay where you are. We need your location." My pulse thudded in my ears. Officer Hale shifted his weight from one foot to the other, keeping his hands visible, keeping his distance. This was not an arrest. This was something else, something in between. He looked like a man who had suddenly realized his shift had taken a turn he would have to explain later. Ms. Rivas asked my full name, my date of birth, my last known address. I answered without hesitation because when federal voices ask questions, you do not improvise. She asked if I was alone. I said yes. She asked if anyone else had access to my identification. I said no. She asked if I had noticed unusual account activity. I laughed, once short and bitter. That depends on your definition of unusual. Officer Hale glanced at me, then looked away, giving me the privacy of pretending not to listen. Ms. Rivas said, "There is a flag associated with your identity. It triggered tonight when your license was run." I said I figured that part out. She said this flag was created in 1998 by someone with access you do not see anymore. The words hit me like cold water. 1998. The box in my mother's garage. The notary stamp photo. The number that would not leave me alone. I swallowed. Who created it? Another pause. That information is tied to an inactive case file. We are reactivating it now. My hands started shaking again, and I pressed them together to keep them still. Officer Hale noticed and quietly asked if I needed water. I shook my head. Ms. Rivas continued, "You are not in trouble, but you are relevant. Stay where you are. Do not contact anyone about this yet. We will follow up. Relevant, not in trouble." Those words should have been comforting. They were not. They felt like the beginning of something I had not agreed to. I looked out through the windshield at a couple loading groceries into their trunk like this was any other night. The world did not care that my past had just been reopened by a database. Officer Hale stepped closer, still procedural. "Are you okay, ma'am?" I said. "Define okay." He nodded like he understood that answer more than he wanted to. Ms. Rivas asked one more time, "Where are you physically right now?" I repeated it. "Walmart parking lot in Mesa, Arizona." She said, "We have your location." That sentence did not feel neutral. It felt like a line drawn around me. When the radio went quiet, Officer Hale gave me my license back. "You are free to go," he said, and then corrected himself. "I mean, you are not being detained. Just stay available." I said, "Story of my life." He actually smiled that time, a tired one. I watched him walk back to a cruiser and felt the protocol fear settle into my bones. Whatever this was, it had been sleeping for decades. And now it was awake. Would you rather be invisible or be found if being found might change everything? I did not sleep that night. After Officer Hale drove away and the Walmart lot went quiet again, I sat in the front seat with my notebook on my lap and the radio silence ringing in my ears. Relevant, not in trouble. A flag from 1998. Someone with access you do not see anymore. Those phrases kept looping like a broken training video. At dawn, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered it before it could stop ringing. "This is Ms. Rivas. I said I was hoping you would call." She did not waste time. "We need to explain what that flag is and why it exists." I told her I was listening. She asked if I was somewhere private. I said my car counts. She said the flag was not created to protect you. It was created to activate an investigation if someone tried to destroy you administratively. I closed my eyes. She continued. "In 1998, your father was a Department of Defense contract auditor and a reservist. He was working on a procurement fraud case at a base in Arizona. It was not dramatic, no explosions. Just invoices and kickbacks and companies billing for equipment that never arrived. He was methodical. He built files the way other people build walls." I pictured my father in his old uniform sleeves rolled up reading contracts at the kitchen table. He used to say the quiet crimes are the ones that ruin lives because nobody sees the damage until it is permanent. Ms. Rivas said he created what we now call a legacy risk trigger, a contingency, a plan B, a set of conditions. If your identity ever showed signs of being manipulated through paperwork warfare, the system would surface an inactive case file from 1998 and alert federal oversight. I opened my notebook and wrote contingency. Trigger. SOP. My collapse was the alarm. The words formed themselves. I said them out loud before I realized it. My collapse was the alarm. Ms. Rivas did not correct me. She said exactly. Your father anticipated that the people he was auditing might not come after him directly. He built a trigger that would activate if they tried to come after his family through authorization by paper. I felt something in my chest loosen and tighten at the same time. He had planned for this, not because he was paranoid, because he understood systems, because he understood that when people cannot beat you in public, they beat you on paperwork. He used to say that when he was irritated about some form, he had to file twice. I had always thought it was just a grumpy joke. Now it sounded like doctrine. Ms. Rivas said the flag is linked to an inactive case file from 1998 involving procurement fraud at Luke Air Force Base. It has been dormant for decades. It reactivated because your identity started showing the same manipulation patterns we see in paper-based attacks. Fraud markers, unauthorized address changes, notarized documents, credit freezes, landlord notices, background check failures. All of it fits the trigger your father set. I stared at the notary stamp photo on my phone. 1998. My voice came out steady, even though my hands were not. Who created the flag? Ms. Rivas said, your father, with authorization from oversight at the time. It was not classified. It was procedural. It sat in the system waiting for conditions that just occurred. I let that sink in. My father had died years ago. He had never told me about this. He had never wanted me to live my life looking over my shoulder. He had just built a contingency and trusted the system to do its job if the worst ever happened. Ms. Rivas said, the case file it surfaced involves a network of shell contractors and intermediaries who moved money through legitimate-looking channels to avoid audits. It is not a conspiracy, it is boring fraud. The dangerous kind. I asked the question I did not want the answer to. How does that connect to me now? She said, the reactivation of the file means someone with access to those old channels or their modern equivalents is using similar methods to manipulate your identity. The patterns match. I thought about the mailing address in Kyle's zip code, the landlord notice, the credit cards, the notary stamp. I thought about him saying the audit will not touch us. I said, my brother lives in the same zip code as the unauthorized mailing address. There was a pause. Ms. Rivas said, we are not accusing him of anything yet, but the financial flows we are mapping include an account that intersects with a business entity he has indirect ties to. My stomach dropped. Kyle, not a mastermind, not a criminal genius, just sloppy, just opportunistic, just close enough to the paperwork to think he could get away with it. He was not the architect. He was standing in the current without realizing where it came from. Ms. Rivas said he appears to be in the money flow, not necessarily the source. The words felt clinical. They still hurt. My father's old case was not about vengeance. It was about documentation, about patterns, about triggers, about letting systems do what they are designed to do. Ms. Rivas said, your father built this so that if someone ever tried to erase you with paper, the paper would erase them back. I laughed quietly. That sounds like him, she said. We are reopening the 1998 file and running modern audits. This is not personal, this is procedural. But it will have consequences for anyone connected to the financial paths we uncover. I asked, "What happens to me?" She said, "Your identity issues will be corrected, your records restored, your credibility repaired. But you should understand something. You are not a bystander in this. You are the trigger. You are relevant." I thought about my father again, about his calm voice, about his checklists, about the way he always had a plan B, about the way he never panicked. He had taught me contingency thinking without ever naming it. He had taught me that systems matter more than speeches. He had taught me that quiet preparation beats loud outrage. I said, "Thank you for explaining it." She said, "Thank your father. He built a trap for people who think paperwork is harmless." When the call ended, I sat there with the sun rising over the parking lot and felt the past and present finally line up. The flag from 1998 was not a threat. It was a switch. And someone had just flipped it by trying to destroy me with paper. 3 mornings later, Ms. Rivas told me to be at my mother's house in Glendale by 7:30. She did not say why. She did not say what would happen. She just said, "Wear something simple. Bring your ID. Do not arrive early and do not arrive late." The way she said it felt like a briefing before a movement. I parked a block away and walked the last stretch because my car still felt like a confession I did not want the neighborhood to read. The street looked exactly like it always had. Trimmed lawns, sprinklers, ticking a few pickup trucks, the faint smell of coffee and warm pavement. A man across the street was dragging a hose while his kid with a backpack waited at the curb. 2 houses down, a woman in leggings waved at a neighbor like they were on a commercial. Normal. Comfortable. The kind of normal my mother loved because it made her feel like she was winning. I stood at the edge of the driveway and watched her porch for a second, letting my breathing settle. Then I heard tires. Not sirens, not dramatic. Just the low roll of vehicles that did not belong on our quiet street. A dark government sedan pulled in first and parked cleanly at the curb. Behind it, a second vehicle, an SUV, stopped with the same quiet precision. No lights, no noise, just presence. The kind that makes people look up from their sprinklers without knowing why. My mother's front door opened like she sensed it. She stepped out in a robe, hair-set face, already annoyed, as if the world had interrupted her morning for no good reason. Then she saw the badges as 2 people stepped onto the walkway. One of them was Ms. Rivas. Plain clothes, tired eyes, a folder in her hand. The other was a man with the posture of someone who has spent years telling rooms to stop talking. Behind them, Officer Hale walked up the drive hands, visible, calm, local support, the familiar face that made this look legitimate to anyone watching. My mother's mouth tightened. "Dana," she snapped, "what is this?" I did not answer her. I kept my eyes on Ms. Rivas. She nodded once, subtle like a green light. The man with her spoke first. "Mrs. Dawson, we are here regarding documents and devices connected to an active procurement fraud audit and identity manipulation pattern." My mother blinked like he had spoken a foreign language. Then she tried to laugh. "This is ridiculous. Dana is unstable. She has been having issues." She waved a hand toward me like I was a stain. I felt the old heat rise in my chest, but I kept my face still. Not because I was weak, because I had learned the power of silence in rooms that want you to panic. The man stepped forward slightly. "Ma'am, we will speak in a moment. First, we need to secure relevant materials." My mother's eyes darted to Officer Hale. She tried to make this a neighborhood thing. Is this even legal? Officer Hale kept his voice neutral. Mrs. Dawson, they have the paperwork. I am here to assist with safety and procedure. The word procedure again. It always came back. The front door opened behind my mother, and Kyle stepped out, shirt half-tucked, coffee in hand, face already wearing that smug smile he saved for moments when he thought he was the main character. He looked at the vehicles, then at me, then at Miss Rivas. His smile widened. What is this, a show? He said it like a joke, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, like he was performing. I saw the man across the street pause with the hose. I saw the kid with the backpack glance over. Kyle liked an audience. Ms. Rivas did not look at Kyle. She looked at me, then at the folder, then back at me. The man beside her turned slightly toward me and spoke in a voice that cut through Kyle's joke like a blade through paper. Ma'am, thank you for your service. We will need your confirmation. My mother froze. Kyle froze. The neighborhood froze in that subtle way people do when they pretend not to listen but their bodies tell the truth. Thank you for your service is not something people say to the homeless woman the family calls unstable. It is something they say to someone whose record they have read. Kyle snapped out of it first and stepped forward, trying to push himself into the center. Hold on. You cannot just show up. Dana does not even live here. This is my mom's house. The man did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply corrected Kyle with the calm authority of protocol. Sir, you are not the subject we are addressing right now. Kyle stopped mid-step like he had hit a glass wall. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked around, searching for someone to laugh with him. Nobody did. Ms. Rivas opened the folder and pulled out a sheet. Dana, she said, we are confirming your statement and your identification. I handed her my ID. My hands were steady. Not because I felt steady, because I had spent years training my body to do steady even when my mind wanted to run. Behind me, my mother found her voice again, sharper, now desperate. This is unbelievable. Dana has been sleeping in her car. She is not well. She is confused. She has always been dramatic. She tried to turn this into a narrative, the same narrative she had been feeding the family for years. I watched her do it like watching an old machine. Same buttons. Same result. Ms. Rivas did not flinch. She did not argue. She just looked at my mother and said, "No, ma'am. She is documented." There is a difference. The sentence landed like a door slamming shut on my mother's favorite excuse. Documented. Not believed. Not liked. Documented. That was the language that mattered. The man beside Ms. Rivas motioned toward the front hall. We will need access to the office area and any devices used for mail forwarding or account access. My mother's face went pale. Kyle's coffee cup lowered slowly like his arm had forgotten how to hold it. From the corner of my eye, I saw Brooke's car pull up fast like she had been summoned by instinct. She stepped out with her phone already in her hand, ready to post or perform, then froze when she saw the badges and the neighbors watching. Her smile tried to appear and failed. "What is going on?" she asked, too sweet, too loud. The man did not answer her. He looked at Kyle, and then back at Ms. Rivas, and the movement itself felt like a decision. Officer Hale shifted slightly to the side of the porch, not blocking anyone, just present, just there to prevent a scene from turning physical. My mother tried again, voice trembling now. "Dana, tell them you do not want this. Tell them we are family." I finally looked at her. I did not glare. I did not plead. I just let her see my face the way it looked when I was done being edited by her. Ms. Rivas held my ID and waited. The man said, "Ma'am, we need your confirmation that you did not authorize these changes and that you have been experiencing administrative interference consistent with the trigger conditions." I nodded. Yes. The word was small. It was also a detonation. Kyle's head jerked toward me. Mom's breath caught. The neighbors kept pretending not to listen while listening to every syllable. And in that moment, the porch became a stage my family never wanted. Not because I was loud, because the system finally spoke louder than their story. If you were Dana, would you speak up now or stay silent to keep the peace? The fallout started before the government vehicles even left the street. By noon, Kyle's bank app stopped working, and he stood in the kitchen staring at his phone like it had betrayed him. He kept refreshing it, logging out, logging back in, muttering that it had to be a glitch. Then a text came from his bank, saying his accounts were temporarily frozen due to a federal audit hold. He read it out loud like reading it might make it less real. Brooke started pacing the living room, her hands flying over her own phone, calling their mortgage servicer, their realtor friend, anyone who might tell her this was not happening. She kept saying, our house," like the words themselves could protect the walls from what was coming. My mother sat at the dining table with her purse in her lap, opening it and closing it like she might need to run at any moment. Ms. Rivas stayed exactly where she was, calm, methodical, flipping pages in her folder and checking items off a list. The man from oversight walked through the house with a tablet asking short, precise questions about where devices were kept, who had access to the computer in the office, whether anyone else used the printer that forwarded mail. My mother tried to charm him, then she tried to cry, then she tried to be indignant. None of it moved him. He just wrote things down. Officer Hale stayed near the doorway, not touching anything, not threatening anyone, just present. Kyle finally lost his temper and snapped at me that I had ruined his life. He said it loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I did not raise my voice. I did not say anything dramatic. I opened my notebook and flipped to the page I had already prepared. It had dates, times, account names, addresses, forwarding changes, contract cancellations, background check failures, a timeline, a checklist. I handed it to Ms. Rivas. She scanned it, then handed it to the oversight man. He nodded once. This is helpful. Brooke's phone rang and she answered it too fast, her voice too bright. Hi. Yes? No. What do you mean, compliance review? Her face drained. She covered the phone and whispered to Kyle, they are auditing your contractor. He laughed short and brittle and said that was impossible because his guy had said the audit would not touch them. That line came back to him like a curse. Ms. Rivas looked at him for the first time. Mr. Dawson, she said your accounts are frozen pending review. Any funds tied to procurement irregularities will be seized temporarily. Kyle shouted that this was a witch hunt. The oversight man corrected him without emotion. This is a routine audit triggered by documented anomalies. Brooke started crying, not quietly, not with dignity, but with the kind of panicked sound people make when their future suddenly has a price tag they cannot pay. She kept asking, what about our house? The oversight man answered her question, the way federal employees answer everything. We will notify you if your property is subject to lien pending investigation. My mother finally stood up and demanded to know why they were doing this to her family. The oversight man turned to her and asked her to confirm whether she had ever used a notary stamp to authorize account changes or mail forwarding for anyone other than herself. She said no too fast. He asked her again and showed her a printed image of a notary stamp impression from an email attachment. It had the year on it. 1998. The room went quiet. He asked her if she recognized it. She said she did not. He asked her if she had ever forwarded mail from my name to Kyle's address. She said no. He asked her if she had access to my documents. She said no. He wrote all of it down. Ms. Rivas looked at me and asked if I was willing to provide a formal statement on the timeline. I said yes. Kyle tried to interrupt again, and Officer Hale finally stepped forward, still calm, still not threatening. "Sir, you need to stop interfering with the federal process." Kyle shut up. I did not yell. I did not accuse. I did not cry. I pointed to dates and explained sequences. I explained how my credit freeze had been triggered at the worst possible moment. I explained how a fraud marker had appeared right before a background check. I explained how a contract had been canceled for trust risk. I explained how my landlord had received a false notice. I explained how my mail had been forwarded without my consent. Every piece fit into a pattern that did not require emotion to be convincing. It required documentation. That was my revenge. Discipline. Precision. Patience. The oversight man thanked me and told me I would be contacted by contracting oversight again. Ms. Rivas told me my clearance history had been restored that morning. She said the fraud marker on my file had been removed. She said my background check status was cleared. She said my credibility was no longer in question. Those sentences mattered more to me than watching Kyle panic, because my name was my life, and my name was back. Kyle's phone buzzed again, and he read another message. His credit card had been declined. His business account was under review. His line of credit was suspended. He started bargaining, saying this was all a misunderstanding, saying he had not meant to hurt me, saying we were family. Brooke sank onto the couch and started Googling federal audits like she could outsearch reality. My mother kept repeating that she was just trying to protect her family. Ms. Rivas finally closed her folder and said they would be back with formal notices. The government vehicles left the street as quietly as they had arrived. The neighbors went back to their sprinklers and their kids and their morning routines. Inside the house, everything felt broken, but nothing had been thrown. I walked out without saying anything else. Not because I had nothing to say, because I had said everything that mattered in paperwork. The calls started that same night after the house went quiet and the street went back to pretending nothing had happened. My phone buzzed with my mother's name first. I let it ring. Then it buzzed again. Then a third time. I answered on the fourth, not because I was ready, but because I was tired of hearing her ringtone echo in my car. "Dana," she said, her voice already soft and fragile, "we are family." Whatever happened today, it did not have to go this far. I stared at the steering wheel and said nothing. She kept talking, filling the silence with the same story she had always told, that she had only been trying to help Kyle, that she had only been trying to protect the family, that she did not know how serious it would become, that people make mistakes, that blood matters, that forgiveness is what good daughters do. I said one sentence. "You did not lose me to the government. You lost me to your choices." She started crying then, loud and messy, and said I was being cruel. I hung up. 5 minutes later, a text came from Kyle. "You do not understand what you did. You embarrassed us. You destroyed my business. You took everything too far. I read it twice. I typed one line and then erased it. Then I typed another and erased that too. Finally, I sent one sentence. You built this with paperwork. Live with it." He replied immediately. "We are still your family. You owe us a chance to fix this." I did not respond. Brooke waited until the next morning. Her message was long and sweet and performative. It started with "Dear Dana" and ended with "Love always." She wrote about forgiveness and healing and fresh starts. She wrote that families go through hard seasons. She wrote that holding grudges only poisons your own heart. She wrote that it would be best for everyone if we could just forgive and forget. I did not reply to her either. The audacity of it sat in my chest like a weight. Forgive and forget was easy to say when you were not the one who slept in a car, or lost a job, or watched your name get dragged through systems you did not break. 2 days later, my mother left a voicemail. Her tone had changed. No tears, no softness, just panic. "Dana, we need your help. We had to hire a lawyer. They are asking about notary stamps and mail forwarding and devices. Kyle's accounts are still frozen. Brooke is losing her mind. This is too much. You need to call them and tell them this was a misunderstanding. You need to fix this." I listened to the message twice and then deleted it. Kyle tried a different approach. His text was shorter, sharper. "You are enjoying this. You always wanted to punish me. You were always jealous." I did not answer. Brooke tried again with a new tone. She wrote that they might have to sell the car, that their realtor friend had stopped returning her calls, that people at church were whispering, that the neighbors were avoiding them, that her parents were asking questions, that this was ruining their reputation, that I could make it stop. I typed my response slowly. "I am not your cleanup crew." She did not reply. The consequences rolled in quietly, not dramatically, but relentlessly. Kyle's lawyer bills stacked up fast. They sold his truck to cover the first retainer. Then they put the house on the market because the audit hold made refinancing impossible. Their friends stopped inviting them to things. The church committee quietly asked them to step down from volunteering. The contractor he worked for cut ties completely after the compliance review flagged irregularities. My mother's book club stopped meeting at her house. Her neighbor stopped waving. The same people who had smiled at her porch now crossed the street to avoid her. The community that had loved her narrative now loved its distance more. She left me another voicemail a week later. Her voice sounded older, smaller. "Dana, please. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But I am your mother. I carried you. I raised you. You cannot just abandon us." I did not call her back, not because I hated her, because I was finally choosing not to be owned by her guilt. Kyle tried one last time with a message that was almost honest. "I am scared. I do not know how to fix this. You are the only one who can." I stared at it for a long time. Then I sent my final message. "I am not your solution. I am your boundary." After that, I blocked all 3 of them. The silence that followed was not peaceful at first. It was heavy. It was full of echoes of everything they had said to me over the years. But slowly it became something else. It became quiet without tension. Quiet without dread. Quiet without waiting for the next insult disguised as concern. Their lives did not collapse in a movie way. They just shrank. Smaller house, fewer friends, less influence, more lawyers, more explanations, more nights staring at ceilings wondering how they lost control of the story. I did not feel joy about it. I felt distance, and distance felt like relief. Do you believe forgiveness is required, or is it earned? The first place I moved into after everything settled was a small studio on the edge of Mesa. Not the kind of apartment you brag about, just a clean room with a window that let in honest light and a door that locked with a key only I had. It smelled like fresh paint and dust and new beginnings that were not dramatic, just quiet. I put my mattress on the floor for the first week because I had not bought a bed frame yet, and because part of me still did not trust stability enough to elevate it. My car was still parked outside, but now it felt like a choice, not a sentence. I set up a folding table as a desk and opened my laptop and sent 3 emails to old contacts who had never stopped respecting my work even when my life looked like a mess. Within 2 days, I had my first freelance compliance contract back, small but clean, with a client who cared more about documentation than gossip. It felt like breathing normal air again. I didn't rush to rebuild everything. I did not announce anything on social media. I did not tell my family where I lived. I just worked. I woke up early out of habit, made coffee, sat at my folding table, and did what I had always done best. I organized risk. I traced paper. I wrote reports that made sense to people who lived inside systems. The money came back slowly, not as a miracle, but as a series of invoices that got paid on time. I bought a real desk, then a chair that did not hurt my back, then a bed frame, then curtains. Ordinary victories that felt bigger than any dramatic revenge. On Wednesdays, I started volunteering at a veteran resource center in Tempe. I did not tell anyone my story. I just helped people fill out forms, find shelters, apply for benefits, and understand letters that looked like threats because nobody had explained them properly. The men who came in were my age or older, some of them Vietnam era, some Gulf War, some Iraq and Afghanistan. They did not need speeches. They needed someone who knew how paperwork actually works. They needed someone who did not treat them like broken furniture. One of them joked that I was better than his last lawyer. I told him I was cheaper. We both laughed. The military never really leaves you. It just changes uniforms. The discipline stayed. The way I lined up my shoes by the door stayed. The way I kept a notebook of tasks stayed. The way I scanned rooms for exits stayed. Even the way I slept lightly stayed. But the edge softened. The hypervigilance became awareness. The anger became distance. I still drove the same car because it worked, and because I did not feel the need to replace it just to prove I could. One afternoon, I took a piece of masking tape and wrote one word on it with a black marker. 1998. I stuck it on the visor above the driver's seat. Not because I was obsessed with the past, not because I wanted to punish myself with memory, but because I wanted a reminder that paper truth matters, that timelines matter, that stories matter, and that the truth eventually outruns whatever narrative people build to hide from it. Sometimes when I sat in traffic, I would flip the visor down and look at that number, not with fear, with clarity. It reminded me that my collapse had not been random. That my survival had not been luck, that the systems that almost killed my life had also been the systems that restored it once the right triggers were pulled. I did not become rich. I did not get a dramatic apology. I did not get closure in the movie sense. My mother never admitted everything. Kyle never took responsibility. Brooke never stopped pretending to be morally superior. The community never apologized for believing the nicer story. But my name was clean, my work was respected, my life was quiet, and my silence was no longer submission. One evening, I sat on the floor of my studio eating takeout from a paper box because I had not unpacked my dishes yet. The sun came through the window at that angle that makes dust look like it is floating in slow motion. I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Not happiness, not victory, just peace without dread attached to it, the kind that does not need witnesses, the kind that does not need revenge to validate it, the kind that comes from finally not being in a war you never enlisted in. I thought about all the things my family had said to me over the years, all the ways they had framed me as unstable, unreliable, dramatic, disposable, all the ways they had told their story louder than my reality. And the sentence formed in my head the same way a mission statement does when it is true. Some families do not break you with fists. They break you with stories until you start writing receipts. I did not send that sentence to anyone. I did not post it. I just let it sit inside me where it belonged. The next morning I woke up, made coffee, and opened my laptop. Work to do, life to live, systems to navigate. And for the first time in years, nothing in my life was being secretly rerouted without my consent. I did not end up rich. There was no moment where a check changed my life or a headline vindicated me in public. There was no applause, no viral video, no dramatic courtroom scene where someone finally said my name with respect. What I got instead was quieter and heavier in the way real things are. I got my record back. I got my credibility back. I got my work back. I got my mornings back without dread sitting on my chest like a weight. I got to wake up without wondering what new piece of paperwork had been weaponized against me overnight. I got to live without being edited by people who needed me small so they could feel clean. For most of my life, I thought winning meant being seen as successful, being impressive, being undeniable. I thought if I could just prove myself hard enough, my family would stop rewriting me into a cautionary tale they could point at whenever they needed to feel superior. I was wrong. Winning was not making them admit they were wrong. Winning was no longer needing them to be right. Winning was choosing not to participate in a story that required my humiliation to make sense. I did not defeat my family. I escaped their narrative. That mattered more than any punishment they received. I did not become a hero. I did not become powerful in a flashy way. I stayed disciplined. I stayed precise. I stayed quiet when noise would have made things worse. I chose documentation over drama. I chose patience over performance. I chose systems over screaming. And in the end, the systems did what people never did for me. They told the truth. I kept my dignity when it would have been easy to trade it for revenge. I kept my boundaries when it would have been easier to cave to guilt. I kept my silence when it would have been easier to defend myself to people who were never listening anyway. I learned something I wish someone had told me when I was younger, and still trying to earn love from people who only respected control. You cannot fix a family that survives by breaking one person. You can only stop being the person they break. I do not hate my mother. I do not hate Kyle. I do not hate Brooke. I do not even wish them harm. I just do not belong to them anymore. I do not belong to their excuses. I do not belong to their version of events. I do not belong to their need for a villain to hide their own choices behind. I belong to my work. I belong to my discipline. I belong to the quiet life I built with receipts instead of rage. If there is a lesson in all of this, it is not about revenge. It is not about justice in a cinematic sense. It is about authorship, about who gets to write your story when the people closest to you keep erasing your truth. I stopped asking my family to see me. I started seeing myself clearly. And that changed everything. If peace costs you your place in the family, is it still worth it?